ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to Think Different. This is our Tanya course. We call it Think Different because Tanya teaches us how to think different about ourselves, about the world, about God, spirituality, purpose, meaning, life, righteousness, virtue, vice. Everything is different when you study Tanya and you have a different perspective. So tonight's class, you may have received the email. So tonight's class is all about garments. It's all about clothing. And clothing is a favorite mystical analogy. Why? Because the role of clothing is really critical. It's really important in Jewish mystical thought. You're dealing with light. You're dealing with energies that are so bright and so infinite that the only way that they can be handled is through garments. What is a garment? A garment essentially is a form of cloaking an energy or a light force so that it is diminished and therefore can be contained. So simple example, an example that we use all the time is literal light that comes through a window, and let's say it's too bright. So you might put up some curtains. And what's the role of the curtain? The curtain's role is to block the light that's coming in the room. Now there's two types of curtains. There's what they call, I believe, blackout curtains, which means that no light's going to get in. And then there's, I don't know what else, I don't know what the other one's called, but there's curtains that are not like completely opaque. They will allow some light to pass through, but the light that passes through is far less light than the original light that exists on the other side of the curtain. So the role of the curtain is to screen the light, to allow the light to be managed and contained on the other side. This is what a garment is. This is the role of a garment, essentially a piece of clothing, some material that essentially conceals what's under it or what's behind it or what's on the other side so that it's more manageable. You know, an analogy for a garment is an analogy, right? Literally, and the analogy is an analogy itself. The concept of an analogy is to take an idea that otherwise may sound too, I don't know, abstract, and to couch it in an example, in a story, in a parable, in a relatable context so that the student can relate to it. This is taking an idea and putting it into a garment. It's not something that comes necessarily intuitively in English language. You wouldn't necessarily use the word garment in this way, but in Kabbalah, in Hasidic philosophy, garment is used all day, every day for this very idea. Take something that's too big, too deep, too bright, too infinite. You put a garment on it. That means you cloak it in something else, and now it's more manageable. So the reason why I'm talking about garments is in order to advance our conversation, which was really important from last week. So last week we spoke about the two realities of God or of divine expression. Well, let's keep it of God. Two realities or modalities of God. There is God's essence and then God's revelation. Two completely different styles or completely different realities of God. There is God as God is essentially, and then there's God as God expresses himself to others. So there's essence and there's light. There's essence and revelation, same duality. And the difference we said is as follows. Essence exists everywhere, simultaneously, without distinction. So when you're talking about on an essential level, there's no difference between higher, lower, up, down, right, left, right, north, east, south, west, light, dark. There's no distinction because essence is everywhere. The example that we gave is when we talk about the soul. So the soul's essence, let me clarify, a particular soul that's giving life to a particular body. So we would ask the question, like we did last week, a rhetorical question. So where you look at a person, right, or think about yourself, let's do this. Think about yourself and ask yourself the question, where is my soul? Soul being life force, and right. So where is my soul? And then you ask, okay, is it in my head? Yes. Is it in my torso? Yeah. My hands? Yeah. My legs? Sure. My toes? Yeah. My soul is there too. So then you ask the question, one second. You're telling me the soul is everywhere? Yes. Equally? Yes. My toe is me as much as my head is me. It's not a different me. It's not less than me. It's as me as anything else. It's equally me. Why? Because on an essential life, soul level, essence is everywhere. The essence is everywhere equally. The top of the body, the bottom of the body, the right side, the left side, it's all the same. However, when it comes to expression, where is the soul consciously recognized? Well, the head has much more of that than the toe. Why do I say that? Because it's not the toe that contemplates its existence and its source and its soul reality. The toe doesn't contemplate that. How do I know this? Personal experience. My toe has never had a good idea, right? The only ideas that my toe has sometimes are getting stubbed, and who likes that? Anyway, my point is that the toe doesn't have the awareness. Where's the awareness? That's in the head. But that doesn't mean that the soul is more in the head than in the toe. It just means that on a level of awareness, there's more consciousness and awareness, sensitivity to the reality of the soul in the head than there is in the toe. So we said the same thing is true when it comes to God. When it comes to God, there is what we call essence, and there's what we call revelation. In the Hebrew, it's etzem, essence, and gilui, revelation. So what is essence and what is revelation? Essence is the core reality of God. And where is that core reality of God? You guessed it, everywhere, right? The core reality of God is in heaven, on earth, in the skies, in the ocean, in the angels, in the souls. Wherever you go, there's God's essence. God's essence fills every inch of every space of the universe, of the created and the non-created beings, the higher beings. Okay, so that's God's essence. But what about God's revelation? Where do you see God? Where do you perceive God? So this he said in Tanya, we had this last week extensively, that the higher realms sense God more acutely. The higher realms really perceive God. The lower realms, not so much. So the higher realms, like, for example, the spiritual world of Atzilut, which is the world of emanation. So that's like the head, like the human head, totally aware, conscious of its own being, self-aware of its own self-awareness, right? You and I, we're aware of self, and we're aware that we're aware of self. So meta, right? So we're like super aware. And then our toes, not so much. Similarly, in the cosmic structure, the higher worlds are very aware of God, and us, maybe not. Maybe we're more aware of, I don't know, other things. Maybe we're more aware of the fact that Atlanta traffic is starting to pick up as more people go out, and it's becoming, right, A lot of people are saying we missed the, anyway. So what's the point? The point is that there's a lot of distractions here in this world, lots of things that capture our attention, and God is not so revealed. God is more screened over here in a garment, coming full circle to how we started today's lesson. So we have this notion of light screened or blocked or lessened by a garment that conceals, just that the garment covers the body. A garment, a layer of fabric blocks light from coming through. So too, the garment is what conceals the divine light as well. Now, by the way, that concealment is only true for divine light. Divine essence is everywhere equally, right? So the divine essence is here, it's there, it's in the higher realms, it's equal everywhere. But divine revelation depends in which exit you got off at, right? If you got off at the higher exits, you're more aware. Lower exits, less aware. So in today's lesson, he's going to ask a really wild question. Stay with me on this question, because it's you gotta think for a minute on this question. The Alter Rebbe, the author of Tanya, the founder of Chabad, so his question is on the very nature of this garment. How can the garment conceal the revelation light of God? Remember, there's two realities, two dimensions. There's God's essence and then God's revelation. Forget about God's essence for a moment. We're talking about the revelation stuff, right? God's manifestation, God's making himself appear to creation. Okay, so we said in the higher realms, it's more obvious, lower realms, less obvious, because God screens himself. Question on the table that we're about to ask, or that we're about to address, is how in the world does any garment screen God's powerful light? How can a garment, first of all, it's not a physical garment, right? It's a spiritual garment. What kind of spiritual garment can obstruct, conceal divine light and divine energy? You tell me you bought a piece of fabric from the fabric store, you bought drapes from the home decoration store or whatever, and you put them up and it's blocking the light from coming in. Sure, no problem. But who and what is blocking divine light? That's crazy, right? What force could possibly block the divine light and energy from pouring through in all the realms? In other words, how do you have higher realms and lower realms that don't see God? What is blocking God? A garment. What kind of garment can block God? That's the question on the table. Okay. So first of all, let me just check in. Does that question make sense? Sort of? Yes? All right. Yeah. What garment can block God? Now, you could give a simple answer. The easy answer would be, look, God can do anything. He can even make a garment that blocks his own light. Done. All right, but that's still a little too easy. I mean, you're not really answering the question. You're not saying what kind of garment is it. You're saying that God could do anything, which is true. So, but that's like, I'm not going to say it's a cop-out answer. It's not a cop-out. It's a true answer, but it's still not defining the nature of the garment. What kind of garment is this? To give you a deeper way of understanding the question. Okay, you ready for this? The whole premise of why there needs to be a garment that conceals on this light is that in order to create lower and lower and lower realms, ending up with ours, we're at the bottom of the food chain here. In a good way, by the way, but just at the bottom of this whole structure of spiritual light diminishing and diminishing. It ends here. There's nothing lower. This is the tachton. This is the bottom. This is the bottom floor, bottom of the elevator, right? That's it. You can only go up from here. So the whole purpose was to create a world in which you and I self-identify, and we're not immediately aware of source, right? We're not immediately aware of God. We're immediately aware of self, right? We know we exist. We know what we need. God, maybe second priority. Again, typically, I'm saying like naturally. So we're first priority, and then everything else is second priority. So in order for that to happen, right, God needed to hide himself. God needed to conceal his presence because, again, as we said before, and as we said last week, if God's full light were to shine, well, then that would obliterate the self-awareness of every creature. There wouldn't be a creature that would say in the face of that blinding light, hey, God, thank you very much. I got my own thing going on. I'm going to go my own way. You do you, I do me. Couldn't happen. It wouldn't happen like that because the light is too bright. So the question on the table is, on a deeper level, I gave you the basic form of the question, but now I want to go deeper in the question. The question is as follows. The moment the light shines in its full measure, everything that comes in contact with that light melts away, because it's this beautiful, blinding, brilliant, divine light. The moment it shines, everything melts away. The question is, then how do the garments also not melt away? You with me? Right? It says that God cloaked the light in a garment, and that lessened the light. Slow down, cowboy. 1 second. How do you cloak the light? The moment the light hits the garment should melt away into surrender, into it should dissolve on contact. The moment the light shines on the garment should dissolve. So you're telling me the reason why, Kabbalah says, the reason why we don't dissolve in the light is because we don't see the light. And why don't we see the light? Because there's a garment in between. Thank you very much. How does the garment work? What kind of magic garment is this? The moment the light hits the garment should dissolve. And if there's no garment, then we should dissolve. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Yeah. So in other words, what is this garment made of? It's got to be some spectacular material that somehow blocks this powerful light of God from shining through. How is that possible? Where does it come from? That's exactly what we're going to talk about right now. So, and this is the second half of chapter 52 of Tanya that we're up to. So he says like this. Before we get inside, I'm just going to give you the basic idea, and then we're going to jump inside. What he says is that the garment is coming from a level of spiritual energy that actually transcends the light itself. It's a bold idea. So remember we spoke about God's essence and then God's revelation. Well, God's revelation is God's light, but it's not God himself. But the garment, the cloak, the curtain, right? The blockage, that garment, which stops the bullet, if you will, in its tracks, which stops the light from proceeding further in an infinite fashion, that garment actually comes from a source that's even higher than the light itself. Because remember, the light is not the totality of God. It's just God's revelation. There's God's essence, which is much deeper than that. So the garment, which conceals, actually comes from a much higher dimension. Some places it says that the garment comes from the essence as opposed to the light, because the essence by nature is not revealed. The essence by nature is more concealed. In other words, like we said before with the example of your soul and your toe, I asked the question, so, okay, think about yourself. Maybe we'll do it in first person, I. So where's my soul? Is it in my head? Yes. It is in my toe? Yes. But as my soul is in my toe is not aware of it. It's not necessarily revealed. It's concealed, as we said before. But the point is that essence by nature is not necessarily that which is revealed. What's revealed by nature is whatever falls into the category of light. So light is what's revealed. Essence is unto itself. The garment that conceals the light is actually closer to essence than the light is. Does that make sense? The nature of essence is more discrete, and it's more akin to the nature of the garment, which is all about concealment and discretion in the sense of blocking that revelation from proceeding. Okay, I hope what I'm saying makes sense. To me, it makes sense in my head, but hopefully it's coming through in somewhat of an understandable way. So he put one more thing before we jump inside the text. The Alter Rebbe in Tanya puts an actual term and a name, if you will, to this garment. What is the garment? He says the garment is God's will and God's wisdom that is enclosed or clothed like a garment in Torah and mitzvot. That is the garment that conceals the divine light that otherwise would shine and obliterate, that would shine upon and obliterate everything out of existence. The garment is actually the will and wisdom of God that is clothed in Torah and mitzvot. Torah and mitzvot are the garments that conceal this light from spreading forth. And since God's will and wisdom, as enclosed in Torah, is a very lofty level, it's even higher than the light, therefore it can provide a block for the light, preventing the light from passing through. Okay, basically, Torah and mitzvot in the source, super high, therefore they can act as a blockage to this light. Now, what we're going to do is, I'm going to share my screen in a moment, but as we are doing, look, there's 53 chapters in Tanya. We're up to chapter 52. And at this point, it's getting a little bit, it's getting a little heavy. So at any point, please jump in, unmute. If you're muted, unmute and ask away, because really it's all about comprehension, and it's all about making sure that everybody's on the same page here. Okay, I'm opening up the chapter on my end. Let me find. Here we go. I have it. I'm going to share it with you. Sharing is caring. Second. Okay, here we go. Can you guys see this chapter 52? Do you see the screen with Tanya? Thumbs up. Okay. All right, we are in middle of the chapter. Okay, on my page numbers, I don't know, Steve, if you have the same page number or not. Mine is 813, but again, I have no idea if that's the same page number as you have.
On mine, it's 789.
Okay. Well, that's close.
It's yeah, right. It's
We're
the second of the four books.
Got it. Of
this series.
Yes. All right, fine. So we are plus or minus 20 pages or so. Okay. So we're up to the paragraph where he asked this question: what is this garment? Right? He says, so we talked about the light and how infinite the light is, and how big, how powerful the light is. And because the light is so powerful and big, it needs some sort of garment to conceal it. So his question here is, but what is this garment which is able to conceal and clothe it, the Shekhinah, the divine light, divine presence, yet will not itself be completely nullified within this light? As I said before, what kind of garment What kind of voodoo magic is this? That the garment conceals and clothes the divine light, yet it itself is not nullified within the light? It doesn't make sense. If the light zaps everything out of existence, so it should zap also the garment. So how does the garment work? Right? It's like it's a never end. It should be a never-ending cycle where the light shines and everything else vanishes. So what's going on here? He answers, what is the garment? What is the magical garment of concealment? He says, this is God's blessed will and wisdom and so forth. In other words, chachma, bina, and dat of God, which are clothed in Torah and the Torah and its mitzvot that are revealed to us and our children. Us and our children is just a way of saying us mortal human beings and even kids, right? So you have Torah, which is the most brilliant and infinite divine wisdom, but it's, what's the right way to say this? It's packaged in a completely understandable and relatable, in a relatable form that even kids can understand on a basic level, right? Kids can study Torah and do a mitzvah. And meanwhile, what they're touching, in essence, is this deep, deep, deep stuff. Why is this so? Why is Torah so lofty? He says, because for the Torah issues from wisdom. Torah comes from chachma. What does that mean? It comes from wisdom, namely chachma ilah, supernal wisdom, not just lower wisdom, terrestrial wisdom, human wisdom. No, Torah is chachma ilah. That is the chachma of the world of Atzilut, the world of emanation, the highest of the four spiritual worlds, which is immeasurably higher than the world of manifestation, which is the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah, divine presence and light, which we're talking about, how do we cover that up? That is on the level of Malchut, the lowest of the 10 energies of Atzilut. Torah is coming from Chachma, from wisdom, the highest of those 10 energies. Therefore, again, just to follow the math, the light stems from here. The Torah, I'm just giving a random spatial example, right? The light is here, but Torah is up there. Therefore, Torah can serve as a garment to conceal the light and make it relatable to us. Why is Torah so lofty and so supernal? Because for he is wise. It's referring to God. God is wise. God possesses the wisdom of Chachma Vatzilot. They're not God possesses. There is this level of Chachma, of wisdom of Chachma Vatzilot, but not with a knowable wisdom, and so forth. In other words, he is wise, but his wisdom, God's wisdom, is not a knowable wisdom. It's not a wisdom that you and I relate to. The Torah, which comes from divine wisdom, is not a type of wisdom that we can relate to. Now, I know what you're thinking, but we study Torah all the time. So it is relatable. That's Torah as it's been lessened and lessened and lessened through garments, concealments, its own measure of garments. Torah descends from level to level, from top down, in order to ultimately be understandable to us on our level as we are living the life, the physical life that we have. So it talks about physical things. It talks about food. It talks about, death. It talks about all sorts of physical phenomena that aren't necessarily true in that literal way up there. So the Torah's wisdom is divine and supernal and not a noble wisdom.
Rabbi, excuse me?
Yes.
So theoretically, maybe even the Torah came down, it wasn't even in a language, how it initiated.
Correct. Torah in its original form, one could say, is so lofty, it doesn't even have certainly the language that you and I would be familiar with. It's a completely different level of wisdom. One of them, as I like what you're saying, because one of the biggest limiters of wisdom is language. Now, it's one of the greatest expressors of wisdom, but think about it. Expressing is already limiting, because the moment you express it, you've expressed it one way and not a different way, and that constitutes a limitation. So yeah, I would agree with you that Torah in its initial form is so lofty, it's not knowable, right? In the Aramaic, it's really nice. Ihu chakim v'lo b'chachma yediyah. He is wise, but not with a noble wisdom. In other words, God is wise, but not like wise, not like the wise that you and I relate to. God's wisdom is of a different level entirely. So one could say, even perhaps, the language that we know of Torah does not exist on that ultimate original level. Let's continue. As has previously been explained. Yeah.
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
Because something here doesn't track to me. That essentially the garment that shields the essence of God. We're saying that is Torah, but the situation is such that I always thought we want to be able to get more through to Hashem, not be is shielded from Him, and yet this is saying the garment itself is Torah. Therefore, the more we study it, the more we're shielded from Hashem. That's what doesn't track. This is what doesn't.
Excellent question. So I want to clarify a few things. Number one, so again, excellent question. So clarification number one, it's not shielding divine essence, it's shielding the Shekhinah from obliterating us. So the essence is everywhere and it's in its pure state, but essence is essence and it's not what we're seeing anyway. What we're talking about here is specifically the Shekhinah, the divine revelation, which we said would also obliterate everything out of existence. Why can't we see it? Because it's concealed. What's the concealment? He says now, the concealment, the garment is essentially Torah and mitzvot. And your question is, what kind of garment is that? You kidding me? We always think of Torah and mitzvot as a way to get back to the source, as a way to see the light, not as a way to hide the light. So what's going on? My understanding, I had the same question. My understanding is that what he's saying is, think about how Torah itself models this type of garment. You see, the Torah, and this is what we're going through right now inside in the text, Torah contains the infinite, unfathomable wisdom of God, and yet it's been somehow translated so that we can understand it, right? In other words, you and I can study Torah, and it makes sense. Yeah, we study Talmud, an ox scores another ox, so the owner of the ox has to pay a penalty. Sure, we're studying Torah, we're speaking Torah. We can have a conversation about it. Can you imagine how far removed it is? Again, I'm not talking about how it's insignificant it is. On the contrary, we'll see soon how significant it is, but how translated it is into our language. In other words, Torah has gone through multiple layers of concealment and cloaking in itself. And thus, the Torah is symbolic of that which conceals the divine presence so that it can be more manageable for you and I to receive. Which means that as we study Torah, ultimately, we're not meant to just be satisfied with Torah on the most basic, lowest level, but we're meant to use that basic understanding as a springboard to understand more and more and to climb higher and higher to get ever closer to the original. Now, we're never going to get to the original source of wisdom, but the goal is to study, basic Chumash, Mishnah, Talmud, and then get into Kabbalah, and then get into Chassidus, and start climbing the ranks, so to speak, and get a little bit closer. And that way, we're reversing the garment mechanism, if you will, which cloaks. So, again, just to clarify, my understanding is that Torah itself is a model of this cloaking, and then the whole thing becomes that which cloaks the Shekhinah. I don't know if I can explain it more, because I don't know that I understand it more than that, but that's my understanding of this chapter thus far. Maybe we'll get more insights as we go along, but what I'm seeing is, therefore, both things. Torah, as it comes down to us, is concealing. But the more we study Torah, the more we can peel back the layers and reveal more, if that makes sense. In other words, the Torah itself has undergone a journey in which it speaks our language. And that means that the light has been cut down. But then as we study Torah, we can hopefully peel back the layers and open up our consciousness and get closer back to the source and see more of the light as opposed to the less. So, yeah.
Essentially, are you saying, or are we saying that as we attain, which we wouldn't, if we were to attain perfect knowledge and perfect performance of the Torah and mitzvot, we would be able to reverse engineer the garment?
So I don't know if there's a separate step of reverse engineering. I think that itself would constitute a reverse engineering, right? In other words, my answer to you is yes, but I think it's even more basic than that. I think the way you're saying it is even more complicated. In other words, if a person were to attain that perfect knowledge, again, theoretically, of Torah and mitzvot, that would be the reverse engineering right there. It wouldn't then trigger reverse engineering. That would be the reverse engineering. That would be straight up that would be an experience of perceiving the truth without the layers of garments in between. Done. Reverse engineer complete. In other words, that is the reverse engineering. That's my understanding. But let's go through it inside. Maybe we'll have a bit of a different nuance here, but that's my understanding. This is definitely not like the first few chapters of Tanya where he's talking about good people, bad people, middle people. I mean, that was like, it's now chapter 52. It's already getting a little bit, nuanced over here. So, okay, let's do this one. So we said basically Torah stems from the unknowable wisdom, the wisdom that is not known. In other words, divine wisdom that's beyond our wisdom. But it's come down to our level. And as has previously been explained, the infinite light of the blessed Ein Sof is clothed, so the infinite light of the blessed infinite one is clothed, again, that word, clothed in and united with his supernal wisdom, and he and his wisdom are one. So it's not just that Torah contains the supernal wisdom, but in the supernal wisdom is the infinite light of the blessed Ein Sof, because God's infinite light and the supernal wisdom, they hang out together. So they're one and the same. They are united together. So that's what Torah is. At its core, in its source, Torah is divine wisdom, wisdom of Atzilut, Chachma of Atzilut, within which is the infinite light. That's pretty lofty. So only, he's going to ask, so how do we understand any of it? Only this is because the supernal wisdom and the Torah has descended, here we go, by means of obscuring gradations from a higher grade to a lower grade with the descent of the worlds until the Torah, has clothed itself in material things, namely the 613 commandments of the Torah. So essentially what he's saying is the Torah originates in this completely like off the charts level, supernal wisdom, where God's infinite light is hanging out and is united with. And then, so then like, what are we doing studying Torah? What's even happening? He says, Torah descends, the wisdom descends, level by level. It's obscured more and more from higher to lower until it clothes itself in the most physical form of Torah, the form of Torah that we study. So we're studying like the lowest form of Torah that speaks our language regarding physical things. And again, as I said to Mark, and as I said to everybody, my understanding at least is that that's why we study Torah and do mitzvot. Because number one, in there is the essence or the infinite light. Somewhere in there is the infinite light. Even if it's behind a bunch of garments, it's in there somewhere. Plus, the more we study, the more we do, the more layers we can peel back and the closer we can get. So here we go. Let's get back to the Shekhinah. As this wisdom of Torah came down by progressive descents from world to world, the Shekhinah too, divine presence also came down and clothed itself in it in each world. So again, the Shekhinah, divine presence, clothes itself in it, in the divine wisdom, in the Torah, in each world. That's what he seems to be saying. So what's the garment for the Shekhinah? It's the Torah, which itself has garments, but it's coming from such a high level that it pulls it off somehow. Just to make things a little bit more lofty, he continues. This is the shrine. In Hebrew, it's called the Heichal. Could mean the chamber, the shrine. This is the shrine of the Holy of Holies. Not the literal one in the temple, but it's what's euphemistically called Holy of Holies, which is contained in each world. Every single world has a level called Holy of Holies. And that's the core of the world. And let's see what he says over here. The Shekhinah resides with the Holy of Holies of each world, this being the divine intelligence enclosed in the world in the Torah of each particular world. So there's a level of Torah in each world, which is the divine intelligence of that world, and the Shekhinah is residing and enclosed in that Holy of Holies that is that level of Torah, divine intelligence in that world. Okay, there you go. So also it has been stated in the Zohar and Eitz Chaim, these are Kabbalistic sources, some of the most fundamental ones, that the Shekhinah, which is Malchut of Atzilut, being the manifestation of the light and vitality of the blessed Ein Sof, which illuminates the worlds. Wherefore, since it is a revelation, it's called God's speech and the breath of his mouth. So if you joined us Sunday, we spoke about this at length. So Malchut is speech, is revelation, the breath of the mouth, as it were, right? For the purpose of speech is to reveal that which was concealed in thought. As in the case of a person, by way of example, speech reveals to the hearers the speaker's concealed and hidden thought. So speech is about revelation. My idea shared with you. Without speaking, you wouldn't know what I was thinking. Speech takes something that's hidden and opens it up. So the same thing is true with the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is Malchut of Atzilut. Malchut is speech. Speech is revelation. Shekhinah means divine revelation, which is something how we started the class today, talking about essence versus revelation. Divine revelation or speech is Shekhinah, which is Malchut of Atzilut. And so this level of Malchut of Atzilut clothes itself, the Shekhinah clothes itself in the shrine of the Holy of Holies of the next world down, Bria. Namely, what is the Holy of Holies of Bria? Namely, that's Chachma, Bina, and Dat, Chabad of Bria. So you have the lowest, again, we spoke about this at Lent on Sunday at Kabbalah and Coffee, you have the lowest point of light from the upper world enclosed itself in the highest point of the next world down. So again, Atzilut, emanation, under it is Bria. So Malchut, the lowest point of Atzilut, connects with and is enclosed within the Holy of Holies of the next world down, which is the top of the next world, which is the Chabad, the Chachma, Bina, and Dat of Bria. Through the fact that the latter Sefirot clothe themselves, now we continue to keep the chains moving. So through the fact that the latter Sefirot, Chachma, Bina, and Dat of Bria, clothe themselves in Malchut of Bria, the souls and angels which exist in the world of Bria have been created. So how do you get creations in each and every world? It's through the interplay between light and garment, between revelation and container, if you will, right? Kind of like physical procreation. You have a source that's giving and you have a space for it for development. So you have this notion of the Shekhinah, which is shining, And then you have, you have the Chachma, Bin, and Dat, and the other energies which are shining, and then you have Malchut, the Bria, which contains it, which then develops the life of that world, which is the souls and angels of the world of Bria. Bria is the world of creation, which has souls and angels. By the way, the souls are nishamot, because neshama, the level of neshama, exists in the world of Bria. All right, let's continue. He's going down the chain of the worlds. And from there also, from Malchut the Bria, in which is enclosed the Shechina, Malchut of Atzilut, which previously had clothed itself in the Chacham Bin and Dat of the world of Bria, after which the latter are clothed in Malchut of the world of Bria. Now, if you're thinking, what in the world is that saying? Yeah, it's a lot of words and a lot of Hebrew there, but essentially, it's like this. The lowest point of the higher world serves as the origin of the highest point of the next world down, which then moves through its own world until it gets to its bottom point. It then creates the creations of that world, and then Malchut jumps back down to the next world down and starts that process again. I hope that made sense, but that's the way that you might be able to picture it with that process. So again, Malchut, which is that lowest energy of every world, serves both as the receptacle and the creative energy for that world, as well as the origin and the spawn of the next world, or spawning that which spawns the next world down as well. Okay, so this also derives what? The Talmud that we possess, the Gemara. The Talmud that we study comes from the world of Berea. Talmud sponsored by the world of creation, as has previously been explained in the name of the Tikkunim, that in the world of Bria, there shine and flow forth the Chachma, Bin, and Dat of the Ein Sof in a powerfully contracted manner, in order that the souls and angels, which are finite beings, shall be able to receive influence from these categories of Chabar, Chachma, Bina, and Dat. Therefore, the Talmud, not the Mishnah, but the Gemara, specifically the Talmud, also originates from that world of Bria, from the world of Bria. For it, the Talmud is also the category of Chabad. In other words, just like the predominant energy of that world of Bria is Chabad, Chachma, Bin, and Dat, so therefore it creates this area of scholarship known as Talmud. Why? For the Talmud is, i.e., it consists of the clearly defined reasons of the halachot. It explains why the laws exist as they exist. And the reasons being rational are from the category of Chabad, intelligence. So if it's rational, it's Chabad. And if it's rational Chabad, it's coming from the world of Berea. And what about the Mishnah itself? And the laws themselves found in the Mishnah, where do they come from? That's not the explanation of the laws. Those are the laws themselves. They derive from the midot, the emotive attributes of the Ein Sof, of the infinite source. Namely, kindness, severity, mercy. As we know in Kabbalah, chesed. Instead of gevura here, it used the word din. Instead of tiferet, it used the word rachamim. Same meanings, just different Hebrew words. So we have kindness, severity, and mercy. This is where the laws come from, not the meaning behind the law, but the law themselves, right? It's from these emotive attributes from which originate permission. Kindness leads to permission. Severity leads to prohibition, right? There are things that are ritually valid and things that are invalid. There are people that assume liability, and then there are those that are blameless. So ritual validity and blamelessness originating from attribute of kindness, once again, right? If you're like, it's okay, it's good, then it's kindness. And ritual invalidity and liability originates from the element of severity, as is explained once again in the Tikkunim. It's like Tikkuni Zohar. It's parts of Kabbalah. So the point is that the Talmud, which is the rationale of the mitzvot, stems from the world of Bria. And the halachot, the laws themselves, which are about yes, no, do it, don't do it, which is more akin to the emotional calculation of I like it, I don't like it, right? Without a ration, before we hit a rationale, it's just like I like it, I don't like it, yes or no. That comes from the world of Yetzirah, as we'll see in a moment, because Yetzirah is the world of emotion, and the laws themselves are more emotive. The rationale is more intellectual. Of course, you can't really separate them, but the study of Mishnah is more Yetzirah-like, and the study of Talmud is more, the study of Mishnah, Mishnah is more Yetzirah-like, the study of Talmud is more Bria-like. So here we go. By virtue of the clothing of Malchut of Atzilut in Malchut of Bria, it then clothes itself in the shrine of the Holy of Holies of Yetzirah. Remember, the Malchut of the upper world forms the top of the lower world down. So it therefore clothes itself in the shrine of the Holy of Holies of Yetzirah, which is the Chabad of Yetzirah, the top three dimensions, Chacham, Bin, and Dat of that next world down. So that's how it works. When later, on the ladder, I don't even know what this translation is saying over here. I don't know. It's a very simple translation here. I'm not sure what it's saying here. What it's saying is that when later on Malchut of Atzilut within Malchut of Bria is enclosed in Chabad of Yetzirah, when that happens, and then it's further enclosed in Malchut of Yetzirah, right? It goes, so you have the lowest point of Atzilut goes into the lowest point of Bria, which then forms the upper point of Yetzirah, and that goes through the whole world of Yetzirah down to its lowest point, Malchut. That's the light, and then the receptacle. So it's like the male and the female, and then it produces life. So what life does it produce? It produces the souls, which are called ruchot. They are created, and the angels that are from the world of Yetzirah. So the world of Yetzirah also has its creations, angels and souls, but different types of angels, different types of souls. One produces Talmud, one produces Mishnah. So each world produces elements that are commensurate to its level, its reality. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama are the three dimensions of the soul from bottom up. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, the world of Asiya, Yetzirah, and Bria. So the world of Bria produces Neshamot. The world of Yetzirah produces Ruchot, right? Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, but from top down, it's Neshama, Bria, Ruchot, or Ruach, Yetzirah, and then our world produces the Nefesh. Okay.
All right,
Now,
quick thing.
Yeah.
Not a question, but that's a typo in that text, because you probably know that. I'm sure you know that. But in mine, it's simply translates when the latter are clothed in the Malchut the Yetzirah.
Yeah.
Not later or latter. That's a typo.
Yeah, well, I think, I read it again to myself, and I think what it's trying to say is when later on or when subsequently the latter are enclosed, but it's just later and latter in such proximity. Just it takes a few tries to make it make sense. I think I see what they were doing, but I would say it's probably not wise to put later and latter in such. I think the way it's meant to be read is when later on the latter energies are clothed in Malchut of Yetzirah, blah, blah, blah. So that's the way I understand it, but I had trouble with it, and I appreciate a translation that cuts out the extra words and just keeps it simple. So I actually like what you have. Okay, next. From there too, from Malchut of Yetzirah, comes also the Mishnah. We said this before. Comes the Mishnah that we possess, which comprise the legal decisions that are likewise derived from Chabad of the Blessed Ein Sof. So it's the laws, which are, we said before, are emotional, but it also has a Chabad element as well, but it's more about the emotional, which is more of the world of Yetzirah. Remember, the world of Bria is the world of intelligence, Yetzirah is emotion, Asiya, our world is action. So it's intelligence, emotion, action. So we have Gemara, Talmud coming from the intellectual world. We have halacha, the laws, the Mishnah coming from the emotional world. And in the world of action, I guess that's where we do it. Only, he says, that the categories of Chabad, that is, the reasons and interpretations of the halachot, are clothed and hidden within the laws themselves and are not in revealed form in the world of Yetzirah. In the world of Yetzirah, you don't have, the focus is not on the rationale. Yes, there is a rationale, but the focus is on the laws themselves, the halachot. Yes, good, no good, I can do it or I can't do it, etc. While the elements of the halachot, which are in a revealed form in the Mishnah, are the very reflection of the midot of the Blessed Ein Sof in the revealed form, right? So the actual halacha, kosher, not kosher, advisable, not advisable, which is what is revealed in the Mishnah. That's like the bread and butter of the Mishnah, either do it or don't do it, right? Either you can do it or you can't do it. So that reflects the midot, the emotional disposition, if you will, of God, of the Blessed Ein Sof in the revealed forms. Thus, it has been explained above, in the name of the Tikkunim, that 6 Sefirot nest in Yetzirah. They, the 6 Sefirot or Midot, comprise in general 2 extensions, right and left. He leaves out center for right now, right representing kindness and left severity, acting with forbearance, deriving from the aspect of kindness, which results in adjudicating leniently, that is to say, to permit a thing to ascend to God, yes, it's kosher, or acting on the opposite on the left side in a stringent manner and so on, declaring that the object is forbidden for use and thereby precluding its elevation to holiness. This is an act of severity. So these 2 traits, kindness and severity, represent the 2 general directions of the emotive attributes as they exist above and from which the halachot of the Mishnah derive. So think about how you communicate with a child, right? So you say to the child, you are allowed to do this or you are not allowed to do this. And the child feels like it's an emotional thing, like either you like it and therefore it's allowed, or you don't like it and it's not allowed. The child doesn't understand that beyond the emotion, if you will, there's a logical understanding. It's not like I only like it or I don't like it, right? The parent says, I don't let you eat this type of food after a certain time at night. Oh, so you don't like it. It's not about only the emotion, it's about an intellectual decision as well. In other words, yes, it expressed itself as I don't like it, don't do it, or I like it, yes, do it. That's the first approach, at first glance, emotional understanding of it. But on a deeper level, it's not an emotional consideration, it's an intellectual consideration. Yeah, I don't want you to eat something with sugar, a lot of sugar at night. In general, it's probably not healthy. But number 2, it'll keep you up at night. You won't be able to sleep because you'll be, bouncing off the walls. So it's not an emotional consideration. I don't like a lollipop, or I don't like you having a lollipop. It's not emotional. It's intellectual. It's just not good for you, right? It's not a good idea. But that's already step 2. You have to have maturity to understand that there's a rationale behind the law that says yes or no. So the yes or no sounds like an emotional reaction. That's where Mishnah derives, although it's not emotional. But when you study it, what you get is, oh, yes or no, good or bad. But on a deeper level, we study Talmud, and then we get the intellectual element of it, which comes from that higher world. And all of this, both the Mishnah and the Talmud, is according to the supernal Chachma Vatzilut, and Bin and Dat are comprised in it in Chachma. And let me just see how much longer we have for this chapter, because we're approaching our time. Ooh, there's still, okay, let me see if we can get to the end and understand it. If not, we'll rewind, but I would love to be able to start chapter 53 next week. All right, here we go. So give me another 3 minutes. And all this, both the Mishnah and Talmud, is according to the supernal Chachma Vatzilut, and Bin and Dat are comprised in Chachma, that ultimately comes from the highest form of divine wisdom. And they, the Mishnah and Talmud, and the illumination of Chabad Amidot found in them, are united with the Blessed Ein Sof, for in all of them are clothed Chabad Vatzilut, with which the light of the Blessed Ein Sof is united in perfect unison. As we said before, Torah ultimately comes from supernal wisdom that's beyond our intelligence whatsoever, connected with the infinite Ein Sof, etc. So you have an infinite wisdom that's couched in ideas and feelings almost, and then we study it. In like manner, he says, in a similar fashion, the Shekhinah then descended. Oh, here we go. In like manner, let me read the unbolded words. In like manner, i.e., in the same manner that the Shekhinah first clothed itself in the level of Malchut of Yitzirah, the Shekhinah then descended and clothed itself in the shrine of the Holy of Holies of Asiya. And each of these three worlds, Bria, Yitzirah, and Asiya, is subdivided into myriad of gradations, which are also called particular worlds. And Malchut of Atzilot, the level of Shekhinah, is clothed in the level of Malchut of each particular world. Moreover, through the above-mentioned clothing, it descends and clothes itself in the shrine of the Holy of Holies, namely the Chabad, which is in the world below it in rank. As I said before, the Shekhinah, which is the Malchut, descends to the first part, the upper part of the world beneath it. This will enable us to understand the wording of the verse, your kingdom, your Malchut, is the kingdom of all worlds. There are multiple levels of Malchut, kingdom. There's one Malchut, which then encloses itself in another Malchut, etc. And it is from the Shekhinah, which is clothed in the shrine of the Holy of Holies of each and every general or particular world, that light and vitality are extended and diffused to that whole world, and the creations contained therein, the souls, angels, and so forth. For they were all created by the 10 divine utterances of creation, these being God's speech, which is termed the Shekhinah. So ultimately, it's the divine energy, Shekhinah revelation, that gives life to all the worlds through this process. All right. And let's read the conclusion here. Divine speech, so we'll just do this and then we'll close out. Divine speech revealed that which was previously concealed. This is also the purpose of the Shekhinah revealing to the world a light which is essentially higher than the world. Therefore, Malchut of Atzilot, which is termed Shekhinah, let's skip the rest of the parentheses, is the level from which life and vitality are drawn down and revealed to all worlds and created beings. And all this is accomplished through Torah, as we said before, all the way at the beginning, or close to the beginning of today's lesson. For Torah is the shrine of the Holy of Holies in which the Shekhinah first resides in every world. Remember, it's the Chachma, Bin, and Dat of every world, which is the Torah. Thus, as mentioned earlier, it serves as a garment to the Shekhinah. So the Shekhinah, which is Malchut of a higher world, descends to become the top of the next world down, which is where the Torah of that world resides. So this Torah is actually the garment that garbs the Shekhinah and allows the light to be manifest in each world, step by step, step by downward step, until it gets to our created reality. So what do we take away from all of this? I just want to go back to what I said before in response to Mark's question. And that is, to me, my understanding is, we have a wonderful idea here about the architecture. We have, these mind-blowing ideas about these different energies in different worlds. And I know we went through it quickly, and it's easier if there's a map in front of us, but it is what it is. But to me, the takeaway is that we have this incredible gift called Torah, which is really infinite divine wisdom, really wisdom that can't be put into words, that's been put into words in a language that we can understand. And when we study Torah, we're accessing not just the Torah that we see and we can understand, but the Torah in its totality. When we grab on to even this lowest end of Torah, we're holding on to something that extends into the infinity and beyond. And thus we're holding a piece in our minds, a piece of God's intelligence. And that's an amazing thing. Plus, we can undo some of the tzimtzum, some of the garments, some of the concealment, and climb ever closer to our source. And when we do so, we'll realize that God doesn't want us to climb too high, because we have a lot more work here to do, as we've been saying in these chapters. So in summation, we've talked about the process of the Shekhinah becoming manifest in the worlds, each one stepped down from the previous world, each one lower and more self-aware, less Shekhinah aware, more self-aware, and how Torah plays a pivotal role in the descent of the divine energy from realm to realm, from world to world, until it reaches ours. All right, that's it for tonight. That's it for chapter 52. Next week, I'm pretty sure we're on for next week, we begin the final chapter. The chapter number 53, which constitutes the very last chapter of Tanya. Let me see how long it is. Okay, it's decently long. It's definitely a 2 or 3 week conversation. So I encourage you to join us next week as we explore the final chapter of Tanya and put it all together. That's the goal. All right, thank you for joining me tonight. A few quick announcements. Number one, thank you, Steve, for pointing out. Steve already received his book for the course. If you signed up for I'm talking about next week's course called This Can Happen. So if you signed up for the course, there you go. Then a book is on its way. We ordered the books. All the books have been ordered. It's up to headquarters based on when we submitted the orders, based on when we got reservations. It's up to them to ship it out. All of the orders have actually been shipped out. I even put in orders a few hours ago. They were already shipped out to arrive on Saturday. My belief is that over the weekend, everyone should get their books. If you signed up for the course and by Monday you did not get your book, please let me know. But the reason why I mentioned this is because of what Steve said before, which inspired me. Steve was saying how he read the first lesson in the book, just the text and some of the readings. And he was so inspired that literally his face was shining and everything changed. The goal of this course is to talk about transformation. And if we're talking about it, we might as well also experience a little bit of that as well. The first lesson specifically, to what Steve mentioned before, to his point, talks about how the world is not as bad. It's not as bad as we might believe it is. We're going to look at the data. We're going to look at the science, and we're going to see how good or how bad are things. And then we can ask the question, so is Mashiach possible? Is a really better world possible? Or moreover, is it at hand? How close are we or how far? Because if you believe what you hear, oh, are you kidding me? This place, it's up in flames. But if you look at the data, you might have a different take on it. So if you think I'm optimistic in general, oh boy, wait till lesson 1. You will get a super optimistic me, and you'll get a super optimistic you, and we're all going to feel better about where we are and about the future. And that's just lesson 1, and we got another 5 lessons plus the great activity of discovering which one I personally authored, which of the 6 lessons I authored. We'll be taking bets. This is right now. Vegas has a separate category for this. I'm joking. We don't wager on Torah, but join us. If you haven't yet signed up, join us. You'll love it. And you'll get a great textbook also that'll make you happy. All right. Thank you very much.
You get a textbook also if you come Thursday in person? I mean, by mail, I mean.
Everything was ordered by mail. Only for one course, a few courses ago, we ordered some stuff to homes and some stuff to us. But you know what I found? I found that it was too complicated to halt cheshbon, to halt cup. It was too difficult to figure out who got a book, who didn't get a book. This way, somebody signs up, we order a book. By the way, JLI didn't open up book orders until Monday or Tuesday of this week. So we were ready to order already from the last few weeks, but JLI didn't open up on their end, the book ordering system for us until early this week. As soon as it opened, we went at it. So that's it. So, but whether you're coming Tuesday or Thursday or both or neither, whatever it is, not neither, but either way, you're expected at your house. Maybe not the right email address, Sandrine, but for sure the address, I'm joking, but the mailing address, you have to get whatever. This is an inside joke. Coming
by mail.
This is an inside joke, but you have to give me some time because I have you in so many different places. It's not just a matter. I wish it was just one thing, but I'm working a little bit more manual than that. So I gotta.
You know me. I don't want to miss anything.
I know. Don't worry.
No FOMO.
We'll make it happen where you know. But yeah, you should get the books. I think I'm looking around. I think pretty much everybody should be on the list to get a book. So stay tuned. If you're not yet on the list for the course, it's not too late. Sign up now. I'll do the order now. You get a book shipped out tomorrow. You get it Monday. Boom, bada bing, bada boom. Listen, you'll anyway, Steve, confirm please, because I didn't get the book myself, the student book. Is it also in color? It's full color, right? We're waiting with great anticipation. It is color, right? Let's see. Oh, baram. I see blues. I see reds. I see other colors. All right, it's Zoom. It's not that clear.
Wait.
But anyway, yes.
Robert,
It's-
I'm afraid you're getting a little cocky about what I told you.
What?
Okay, because I didn't tell you what my nephew immediately said. And what he said was, where was the data originated from? So I was impressed, but he's a brain surgeon. Maybe he looks at things differently.
Got
The
it.
first thing he said, who and where?
Yeah, who and where. But the good news is that all the sources are documented in the book. So we'll go through
Okay,
them.
but he still wants to know what numbers you got from where.
No problem. So
So-
first of all, he should be at the course. You can bring him
I
to his
just
first
told
class.
him, it's my rabbi, just listen to it. That's it. He recommended it. The
I'm
numbers.
going to
have
use
be
that.
right.
I'm going to use that as well. I'll say if
Okay.
somebody asks me a question, I'll say, look, I'm the rabbi, you listen. That's it. No more questions.
Know your
We'll-
place.
We're going to do this course old school. We're going to do it like, back in the day in Sunday school. You can't ask questions. You're done. We're finished here. Nothing to look at, nothing to talk about. Moving on. No, I'm kidding, obviously. But this should be fun. If you're not yet signed up and you want to be part of the party, by the way, you can join if you're not sure, whatever, you don't know your schedule, you're not sure about the class, you're not really sure how it's going to make you feel, just join the first lesson. You can always check it out, free of charge, but just let me know that you're coming. On the website. You can choose the free course trial, right? Get in on the action and take a test drive, right? There's no super pressure sales tactics here. This is Torah, baby. I'm giving you, listen, this is access to supernal wisdom. Hey, take it or leave it. You know what I mean? This is like, it is what it is. All right, folks, I want to wish you a good Shabbos. I may see some of you tomorrow at 12 for DPP. But either way, I want to wish you a good Shabbos. Oh, and many of you I'll see tomorrow night as well for the Shabbat dinner. It's going to be a lot of fun. And either way, wishing you a good Shabbos and good health. Lots of blessings. All right, good.
Thank you. Good
Good
Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Pleasure.
Tomorrow.
Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you guys soon. Take care.